They look so happy.
All right, we're back.
Where were we? RDA.
We're in the RDA.
So we have gone, we're to the
Not bad, we're just starting, right?
redevelopment agency meeting. We will start with amend the fiscal year 2018 RDA budget. Public hearing.
So we'll have Jake review the proposed amendments to the current RDA budget, and then you can proceed with the public hearing.
Okay, so here we show that reduction of the additional increment to pay for the Utopia debt down to that 192,707, and that's offset by this other obligations line. That's kind of been our line to help balance the RDA budget. We also decreased the additional increment transfer, and then there's that one from drainage, the 1,102. And then this transfer to the park, that's that 100,000, which is what we found. That was the dirt.
Right.
Right. That was on the DCPA site. Well, moved from DCPA to the community park expansion. So that's really it.
Let me clarify that the other obligations line where it shows amended amount of 140,812, most of that isn't there, and there's not funding for that. That was just, again, a plug in the budget, and we've reduced that plug to offset the other amount. Our total revenue was about 135,000 less than we had budgeted
So
for the
there's 5,000 or
RDA.
6,000 there for real.
All right. Any further comments before I open up the public hearing? So this matter is open to a public hearing. That means any member of the public can come to the microphone to discuss this matter. State your name and where you're from, please.
Yeah, my name is Sean Johnson, with River Hall, with whom I with Salmon Construction now, from Ogden. So I just have a couple questions as far as all that stuff. First question, trying to understand the CDA better. Does the CDA ever terminate? Or is it something that's there until the full development?
The redevelopment agency is an ongoing entity, but the project areas terminate after a certain number of years, depending on how many years it was created for.
Okay.
So we have 3 project areas.
Right.
The Legacy Crossing project area was created for a life of 15 years, in which the tax increment generated, the additional tax increment generated would be available to be used by the RDA.
And that started in 2014, right?
And that first year looks like it was 2014, so it will terminate, the last year would be 2028.
Okay. Okay, so just to gain an understanding of that, obviously, you know why I'm here. So then that would limit the funds that we would receive for legacy trails we would lose 4 years. So it would be
10
over
years.
10 years?
Yes, 10 years
Okay.
left.
Okay, yeah, just getting an understanding. Second question, following the funds, what was the money that was borrowed from like the drainage fund and the parks fund and given to the CDAs? What was that for? What was that money originally used for?
Money that was borrowed from the parks and the drainage. There was, if you're referring to these numbers you've seen tonight or that we've been referring to tonight, the $100,000 figure was several years ago when the Performing Arts Center was constructed. The soil out of that hole in the ground to build that thing was taken over and put on the property that became the expansion area for the community park. And the idea that it would be incorporated into that park improvement. Several years later, however, it was determined as we got actually into the planning, the designing of the plans for improving that 6-acre area, it was determined we did not need all of that there. And so it had to be, and it had to be managed on-site. Managing that soil on-site was a cost, and relocating some of that soil to other places was a cost that was estimated to be about $100,000. So the council, or the RDA at that time, agreed that that really was an expense of the RDA.
Because it's RDA dirt.
Because it came from the RDA project site for the Performing Arts Center. So that $100,000 is being paid now. The cost, that $100,000 cost several years ago, which was paid at the time by the Parks Fund, is now being repaid by the RDA to the Parks Fund.
Okay.
And then as far as the drainage, there were a number of expenditures in the Bernard Creek. It was the Bernard Creek culvert project. That was a joint project between the city and the county on the west side. That is within the project area, the Bernard Creek CDA project area. And those expenses were initially charged to that project area as RDA expenses, but were later reassigned to the drainage fund, determined that those expenses could be transferred to the drainage utility fund, which was a legitimate source of funding for that culvert project.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So looking over the budget, specifically with the Legacy Crossing RDA, I noticed that the budget is consistent next year. It's the exact same number. I believe it was 160, if I remember off the top of my head. So you don't suspect that the U.S. development will do any better they did this past year than they will next year? Is that what you're saying?
Actually, we have some,
We actually have some changes to that.
Okay.
Some updated numbers.
but that's coming in.
That'll be the next discussion.
This is the only revision to the tentative budget. Are you looking at the tentative budget numbers?
Yeah,
Yes.
that's all there is on here, yeah.
Yeah. So it was.
This is the current.
No, yeah, I'm saying on the next item.
Okay. I think if you can, and I'll defer to the mayor here, if you can, if the mayor wants to allow you to come back up and ask your questions after we present the new budget, the revisions to the new budget.
Okay.
There'll be some explanation and a handout pertaining to that.
So, yeah, if you'd like to, on our agenda, we're amending the 2018 budget right now.
Right.
And then we're going to go to adopting the 2019 budget. When we discuss that and we give Steve and Jake their chance to discuss that, if you have questions on the 2019 budget, then, yeah, you're welcome to come
Okay.
back up.
Cool.
But if you have any more on the 2018 comments or questions, then get those out right now.
One more question, just following the RDA and all the funds involved with that. So going through different meeting minutes, there was discussion at one point to have Gary Wright build the trail from the north all the way down to Parish Lane. There was going to be some RDA funds that were committed to that, and then you guys were seeking some government funds. I understand the government funds didn't work out, but I never found a conclusion on the RDA funds. So first of all, is Gary Wright still required to build that trail? And second, is the RDA from Bernard Creek going to assist in that?
Gary Wright was never required to build that all the way from the north down to Parish. He's only going to be required to put it in along the frontage of his project. The idea was that we were going after the federal fund, the federal grant, to pay for it from that point to the north. And since we didn't succeed, and that we would use some RDA money from the Bernard Creek project area as the match for the federal funds. Federal funds didn't come through. We didn't get approved for those, so now there's no certain funding plan for the extension of that. The possibility is that RDA revenue from the Bernard Creek project area could be used to extend that from the Wright property further north.
Okay.
Someday, but it's
Right.
just not a definitive plan yet.
So that was listed as a PDO requirement on Gary Wright's stuff, to build that trail all the way north was,
No,
It
no,
wasn't?
no. It
Okay.
was not a PDO requirement for Gary Wright to build it all the way to the north.
okay.
He is required to put it along the frontage of his property. Now, Lisa, you have been in these meetings, so you can correct me if I'm wrong, but
Are you talking about
We're ta-
Spencer Wright's
yeah,
project, Legacy Commons?
Spencer
Yeah,
Wright's project
Legacy
on the north
Commons.
side. You said Gary Wright, but it's Spencer Wright.
Okay, sorry. Yeah.
He's only required, as part of the approval for his project, to put it along his frontage.
Okay.
And we hoped that that was going to be the first segment of a pathway that extended all the way.
Which I love that concept of tying him.
Well, it's not abandoned. The idea is still there as a long-term vision and desire, but
Okay.
there's no a funding plan that's been approved.
I feel obligated to say no further questions. Thanks for letting me interrogate you.
Okay.
Thank you. Any further comments on the public hearing? If not, I will close the public hearing, and we will go to further discussion on the amendment of 2018. Any further discussion or comments before we have a motion?
Motion to adopt Resolution 2018-01.
Do I have a motion to adopt Resolution 2018?
Do I mean 02? Yes, I get no. Do I mean 02?
It's
No,
02, yeah. Do we have a second?
Second,
It's 01.
It's 01?
Yes.
for FY18.
This is the FY18 budget amendments. Unless I'm looking at the
Oh,
wrong
yeah, you're right.
attachment.
That's
Okay.
2018-02 is adopting the 2019 budget, isn't it? So,
So just for clarity, let me re-motion on that. Motion to adopt 2018-01 from the amended budget for FY18.
Second.
we have a motion and a second. We're not mayor and council here, are we? We're chair and board.
We're directors.
We're directors. Roll call vote from directors that we need?
Aye.
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 Got to vote, Mayor.
I can't vote.
Oh, I thought he was the one on
No,
there.
they're still not. They're still,
Oh,
Lisa's
again?
still not letting me.
Oh,
So,
that's
We tried.
That's favoritism. She let the last mayor.
In addition to this.
motion passes 5-0. Okay, item 2 on is adopt the fiscal year 2019 RDA budget. Is that Jake or Steve?
Well, we're over here recognizing some last-second things that we didn't quite take care of.
That sounds like a motion to table until Tuesday, the 26th.
We could do
Notice
that.
for an RDA meeting to adopt the budget. Is that what you need?
Yeah, I think that would help, but we'll go ahead and, I think what they're interested in, though, will be explained in the next item on the agenda, so.
Southeast corner?
No, I'm sorry, on the fourth item on the agenda.
Oh, okay.
Tax increment revenue projections and obligations, potential uses of revenue. That will relate to the adoption of the new RDA budget. Be good background, and it will also be the reason why they're here, I'm sure.
So on item number 2, do we have a,
Motion to table
thank you.
until the 26th, when we convene a special RDA meeting to reconsider.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to reconsider the 2019 RDA budget. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Nobody. Okay, southeast corner of 1250 West and Parish Lane. This is, they're talking about the welcome sign.
Yeah, I have a proposal from the architect Dan Sontag, who did the initial design of that intersection corner, at a cost of $1,200 to do a redesign. I have the email somewhere. Where did I put it? Oh, it's probably over here, right here. He says to design the sign and the space around it to a level sufficient for costing. That would produce, and it would also produce a 3D model of the sign, $1,200. That would, now that does not, I need to clarify, he's not going to prepare construction plans. That will get us to a point where we have something with a cost estimate. We'll know what it would look like and able to then negotiate or deal with Hogan, who's offered to donate a good portion of that. But at some point, there would be some cost to prepare the final specifications for it. And until we have the redesign conceptually or preliminary, there's no point in authorizing money for a set of construction plans. The $1,200, I think, is a reasonable price. It'll be involving some discussion with the Hogans during that process. So if you want to proceed, then that $1,200 would come out of, we could authorize it out of the current budget, and if it spills over into the next year, then we'll just amend the budget at some point to reapprove that if we need to.
I have one question on that. Jack Delstatius from the foundation has been caught up about this thing with the foundation too, so is this
Oh, he's been on my case for 2 years.
RDA expenditure, or just funds that the foundation's looking to raise to do this?
Well, if the whole thing started, well, let me back up. We got a conceptual design for all 4 corners several years ago. And this corner we're talking about was to include a Welcome to Centerville sign. And I think that's what triggered then Jack going to Hogan and seeing if they would be willing to donate that sign. And when all was said and done, they have said, well, we'll donate $13,000 worth of that sign. None of us knowing yet what the sign is really going to cost, because we don't know what for sure it's going to look like. And
That's right, that's what he was
So do
discussing.
we say to him, we want it designed for a certain amount of money, rather than have him come in and go, it's $100,000? Can't we say to him,
Well-
we'd like you to design a welcome sign, and we'd like you to do it for $15,000?
well, this is my frustration. If you haven't sensed or perceived my frustration on this matter, let me just make it clear. This has been very frustrating because I didn't initiate this with Hogan. In subsequent discussions, which I have had with Hogan, they are saying, well, we don't know how much of the work we actually can do. If it's a concrete sign, then obviously we can do much of that, but there's other aspects of the sign that you may need to pay us for because we don't do that kind of work normally. And so where I am is kind of in an awkward situation. I don't have the ability to negotiate and bring you anything from Hogan until I have a design that fits the corner, now that there's structures there related to the traffic signal. I don't have a design that I can go to Hogan with and say, hey, or that I can even work through with Hogan. And that's the idea, is why Dan's designing this. We would talk to Hogan about the possibilities.
But I think we want to give him an idea of how much we're willing to pay for the sign, so it's doesn't come back in, we've wasted our $1,200 and it's, way more than we can afford. I think we need to give him, like on the park sign,
Why
I'm
don't we
saying,
just
let's
also-
raise this much money, and then we'll build a sign for that much money.
Just a second, Tammy. As far as I'm concerned, we can delay this matter. But I've been feeling some pressure from Jack, particularly in the Community Foundation Board, to go forward with this.
Well, I'm not necessarily wanting to delay it, I'm just saying, we can't just give him,
Sky's the limit.
yeah,
Why
the
don't we
sky's
just
the
ask-
limit. He
why
needs
don't-
to be told, this is the scope, we want the sign developed in so that he doesn't come in and we don't have to pay him for something that we can no way afford.
And he could communicate with Hogan and what their capabilities are. And
Yes.
consider that
Yes.
in his design. So,
I'm with you on that, Tammy, that if I don't want to design the sign that suddenly Hogan says, you know, we're only capable of 20% of
Yeah.
that from our
Yes.
our
Right.
It
basic
needs to be,
capabilities.
it needs to be
the
designed
other way.
in partnership.
Right.
Yes, and I agree with that. That's been the intent.
so if that's communicated and that will be part of his process and this is the process, I say, let's move forward. Sounds great.
Yeah, I just want to make sure you know that there would be some cost later to prepare some specs and plans for for building it, depending on how much guidance is needed to Hogan for that possibility. Now, let me make sure you also understand this, and whether this is an issue. And expectation from Hogan is that their logo would go somewhere on it. Is that acceptable to the council?
Sure, right on the backside of the sign, just fine.
On the left corner?
I need to know what's acceptable because I need to communicate that to them.
I think it would depend a lot on how much of the cost of the sign they're able to.
What is their expectation?
Yeah.
Centerville brought to you by Hogan? Or
No, somewhere
or
on
some
the,
little-
somewhere on the face, even in a lower corner, could
I
be
mean,
there.
if it's concrete, just even subtly stamped in maybe, but, and just to maybe correct the history just a little bit according to my memory, Hogan, it was all tied up in the centennial celebration, I believe.
That's right.
And so Hogan came, and I didn't know they were pursued for this by the Community Foundation. I don't know if that's accurate or not. But they came and said that we would want to participate in the centennial celebration in this way. And then the council talked about the fact that this is a major gateway to our city, this Four Corners area. And we've gone to great lengths up in the Parish Gateway area, which is also a major gateway, to require and request and be very deliberate about a really high-quality look. And there's absolutely no reason we shouldn't be doing the same thing here. So that's why we got
Yeah.
the design in place.
Yeah, I think you're right, Tammy.
Why have Hogan contribute and build an expensive, nice sign and not have it be part of a plan for the entire Four Corners there?
Yeah, that's right. They did come and express a willingness to do something, and we directed them to that corner.
And this is just,
And
how fast we work on things, so.
When then the traffic signal went in, and then it affected the design. The design for that corner didn't pan out, couldn't be used with the traffic signal structures there.
If Hogan is still amicable to doing the work and they're still interested in the donation, basically using these funds to prepare an estimate's reasonable cost control, as long as we're 100% sure they're still committed to the project. If they're not committed, I don't want to expend the funds for a design that we can't actually use.
I would suggest that you or I, Steve, talk with Jack on a conference call with Hogan or something to make sure they're really committed to it, because I just don't know how committed they are. Maybe they are. I mean,
Well, I think they are committed to a certain dollar amount, which they've mentioned to me. I don't know what part of the sign cost that will be, and the corner improvements around it that it's integrated into. So, yeah.
So maybe what you do is you approach the designer on the basis of, we got about $15,000 to spend on a sign, much of which is gonna come from Hogan. Put something together along that line, and so we're putting a little bit extra into it, and we think we're gonna get someplace in the 10 to 13 area from them, as long as it can be primarily concrete. Does that make sense?
I'm comfortable with a motion that would authorize Director Wilkinson to be the final authorization on it. I mean, if we say as an RDA, we're fine with the expenditure subject to final approval from the
Acceptable.
mayor.
Oh, acceptable commitment from
Right.
Hogan.
I'm totally, for that amount of money, I'm totally fine delegating that approval authority as the director over to the mayor.
I don't have any problem with that.
Yep, that's good.
Well, I will motion that we authorize the expenditure of $1,200 of RDA funds for the redesign of the Welcome to Centerville sign, subject to final approval by the mayor.
Do we have a second?
Second.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Great.
Okay.
You gave me a note of something I have to do, thank you. Item number 4, discuss fiscal year 2019 tax increment revenue projections and obligations and potential uses of revenue. Is that,
I've got handouts for this,
okay,
and I've got one extra for the guys out there if they,
See, you became part of us already.
I think there's enough of those to go down. There's one for you, Joe. If we give one of these to them, I don't have one for Katie, so. Okay,
She can have mine at the end.
and then this one, I do have one more here that you can give them, and there's one for Katie as well as you, Jake.
So just one for you.
So you, Katie, and one to them. Hand that down. How you like my, this is today's afternoon fast, and this was today, red line, update,
I have always been grateful for your good handwriting.
that you can read it at least.
you can tell it's not city business, but RDA business, right?
Yeah, I apologize, this isn't more neat,
Didn't have
but
much staff to throw at
like I
it.
say, this was scrambling today to get ready for this subject tonight. We received less than 2 weeks ago, it was like 10 days ago,
It was the Friday before.
the report from the county indicating for each project area how much tax increment we could anticipate this next year. And I asked Jake while I was out of town to meet with Heidi, contact Heidi at the county and get some explanation of some things. That may have helped to some extent, but not completely. I'm going to review some numbers with you here that Jake and I, these are the best numbers we can give you, rounded off. I say rounded off, we should produce some more exact numbers to put in this adopted column on the RDA budget next week. I'm giving you some rounded off numbers in this worksheet here for the purposes of this discussion. But they're within ballpark, they're rounded off from, for purposes of this discussion, I think these numbers are sufficient. So you can see that this handout, this one that says RDA project areas financial projection, which I initially gave you like in March or February, whenever it was, and then I revised it in May, and that was before we received this latest report. So I revised it again based on this latest report. We think that in the Parish Gateway RDA area that the regular tax increment will be about $911,000. And there'll be, in addition to that, there'll be the additional tax increment, but that's not on this analysis because that will simply be offset, that will be used as a transfer to the Utopia debt payment. And then you have the expenses there, which I've updated, from those same reports that we got 10 days ago. Jake has determined that the tax increment payment to Dayton West will be about $80,000, to Land Rover about $34,000. Then we're still assuming administrative costs of $150,000. That includes the $124,000 administrative services charge that you've seen earlier tonight that is transferred over the general fund, but it also includes some expenses within the RDA that can be spread among the several projects areas. So that's why we're using the 150,000 number. That's down from the 200,000 number that we used earlier on this worksheet. And so you see that I've written in revenue over expenses next year, estimated to be about $88,000, $87,762. Consider that round off to 88,000 approximately. That has not been committed to anything particular in the Parish Gateway budget. And then you go down, and I didn't adjust the years thereafter, after next year, but I think you can assume that the following years would be similar, if not a little greater, for the Parish Gateway project area. The tax increment might increase a little bit, maybe not much, probably not much. They did increase the assessed value for the office buildings, didn't they? The MTC office buildings?
Oh, yeah.
Jake? Okay. And then down in the Legacy Crossing CDA, we're estimating about $253,000 for the tax increment there based on this latest report. The tax increment payment, however, will be about $172,000. Administrative, I'm not changing that one. And so you see that we have revenues over expenses of about $56,000 next year, estimated for that project area that is available. And the other handout we'll go to in a minute as to how I suggest that could be used. And then in the Bernard Creek project area, the tax increment will be more like $95,000. The increment payment will be about $30,000 as we had shown before. The housing revitalization, 10% is 10% of the $95,000 above. And then administrative, leaving about $42,000 revenue over expenses. So you can see that if you add those three numbers that represent revenue over expenses, we got what, 88,000, 56,000, 42,000. The total of that is
180, between 180 and 190.
okay, 180 to 190,000. But you can only spend it according to project area for legitimate or eligible projects for each project area. So assuming that these gentlemen would be here tonight, when they saw this on the agenda, I've given them a copy of this other handout as well. I want you to, now, do we need to hand out this one that,
Well,
did
it's
you
just,
hand out that?
this is just a detail of the increment.
Oh,
Or the,
what about the one that shows the 60,000 for the Legacy Crossing, generated by the apartments? Did you copy that one? Or not? If not, I'll just give him the number. Remember
no, I didn't.
that's this one,
Got
Jake.
that one.
This one?
Mhm.
Okay, so we determined how much increment will be generated this next year from the Legacy Apartments development, including the Maverick Station and the 2 vacant commercial lots as well as the apartments. And it's about $60,000, it looks like. I'll have Jake double check this between now and next week, but it looks like it's about 60,000. So how would that, now let's look at this handout. This handout shows that if you pay them, Fred Hale and Salmon, the $75,000 for the trail connection over a 3-year period, that's $25,000 per year, 2019, 2020, 2021. If you begin, we need to begin at some point the payback of the loan to the Parish Gateway project area from the Legacy Crossing area. That's about a $200,000 loan. If you paid $20,000 a year for the remaining 10 years, that would pay the 200,000 off. Now, it doesn't all have to come from any particular site, the apartments, legacy apartments property values, but the tax increment from the legacy crossing development on the east side is all committed. It's obligated to go back to the developer. Keep in mind, we're only receiving as an RDA 30% of the tax increment from all the other taxing entities and 50% of the tax increment from the city's levy. So to pay back this loan is going to have to come from properties developed other than the legacy crossing development that kickstart this area. The right development on the north side of Parrish is within the legacy crossing project area, so that's a source of future tax increment, none of which has been committed to that developer.
But that property would only have a maximum of 10 years, right?
Yeah, it's going to be less because by the time it gets on the tax rolls, it's probably 2 years down the road, so maybe 8 years on the tax rolls during the remaining life of the project area. So, how much, if you assume that there's now maybe another 10,000, if you look back over here on this, I'm showing you about 56,000 available. And if you plug in 10 or 11,000 here on this tax increment line, you're using the $56,000 of available tax increment in 2019.
Right, and I'd also just like to repeat again, since we're repeating this discussion again, that the idea of spending the full amount every year, I think, is very faulty. That I know that we're going to have high cost improvements that we'll want to do in that area when the freeway's redone. And so I personally think we should have a pseudo savings account line in all of these funds and be setting aside some every year. So
with the restriction by area, when she talks about that, and this is obviously something that's brand new, well, it's not brand new, but we have talked about a lot. Do all of the areas benefit, and therefore all of the areas could contribute to improvements?
My recent reading of the tax increment agreements for Bernard Creek, for all three project areas, lead me to believe that interchange improvements could be funded from any of the three areas.
they're all benefited from that.
Yeah, that's what I would think.
If that's what you're really
That's what I'm
asking,
asking.
yeah.
It's reasonable, it feeds all of them. So,
Yeah, and the way the project plan, area plans were written provides language that I think can encompass that assumption. Now look down below the line. This is another issue that I want you to be reminded of. There's approximately $117,000 owed to the general fund from the RDA for the Parrish Lane fencing upgrade. And where is that ultimately going to come from to pay back Parrish Gateway? Well, if you look over here,
General.
excuse me, to pay back the general fund. I'm sorry.
It's getting late.
Yeah, if you look back over here, you could see that if you focus on the Parrish Gateway project area, the revenues over expenses, that could be paid back in the next 2 years if you wanted to take it all from the Parrish Gateway area. Some of it could come from the Bernard Creek project area, which you see down here will have some surplus to appropriate. But there are also future improvements in the Bernard Creek area we've talked about. One was mentioned here tonight, the pathway along 1250 West.
Well, and in my mind, I think about the use, that pedestrian biking bridge is going to be more commonly used from people on the east side going to visit the services on the west side that aren't the employment center that Bernard Creek is. So it makes more sense to me
That it comes out
that
of
it
Parish
comes out
Gateway?
of Parish and Legacy, if anything,
Oh.
and not Bernard Creek.
Well, you can see that the Legacy is very constrained.
I understand that,
So
so
I
one or
think-
the other or both, but yeah.
The Parish Gateway one is clearly the one that's in the best position to begin paying back that loan to the general fund.
And how many years were each of these three again?
Well, I'm showing on this page the remaining life of the Parish Gateway RDA. It only has these 4 years left. But in the fourth year, there is no debt service payment for the Performing Arts Center, so that's why you see a large number in that fourth year that's available.
Yeah.
Right there, yeah.
And we essentially got forever to spend that.
I think that's the case. You can, yeah, as long, the RDA would set that aside, and you know, that would be available there, and I think you can, according, now, we can verify that, make a note of that, Jake, with Jason Birmingham, for example. But I've heard him say that before.
Okay.
When Blaine was here and he and I were meeting with Jason, and we were talking about, okay, what's the potential uses of the Parish Gateway revenues that might exist at the end of the life of that project area. And we talked about, well, maybe a revolving loan fund that would be created to help update the businesses in that area. Performing Arts Center, Theater Reserve Fund, you know, it could go into that or be used for that. So yeah, I think it can be spent after the expiration of the project area. But let's confirm that, Jake.
I'm in agreement with Tammy that the funds coming out of the Parish Gateway project should be the ones that get expended. I would really like to see the payback in 2 years, mostly because of the anticipation of future strains on the general fund that are to come. I'd like to get that loan repaid as soon as possible.
Yeah, that would improve the cash position. Now, we have already showing on the balance sheet that this is owed to the general fund, so it's an asset owed to. So it
Right.
won't affect the balance, but it does affect the cash position.
Which is what I'm interested
Yeah.
in making sure we improve.
Yeah. So there's kind of the layout. And these gentlemen can see it for themselves. You know, this is.
Tammy, a question for you. Did you have any idea on how much that reserve should be?
Yeah, I'll do more research on that. I have done research, and it's actually extraordinarily difficult to find out what cities have spent. It's unbelievable how difficult it is. But I will continue to work on that so that we can get a
Because
goal.
fundamentally, I agree with the concept.
A
I'm
goal
just
number.
curious
But
what it would
I've
look like.
called 3 or 4 cities and had a really hard time getting that information.
Are you talking about landscaping and interchange?
Yeah,
Better.
betterments for
Now,
when-
several years ago, I don't
Or
know if-
Betterment's Reserve, something to that effect.
a number of years ago, we actually paid an architect to come up with a conceptual plan when they were talking about the SPUI design, which is probably not going to be the end design.
Right.
And he put a cost estimate to that.
Oh, in June.
I'm remembering in the neighborhood of $1 million.
That's exactly what I would just say off the top of my head, is that would be our goal number. So,
I don't have an issue trying to hold back funds to have that available. If the future RDA decides they want to expend them all at one time, that's, up to them, but at least it's available to do that.
right. We're a save and spend kind of a council, right? We've proven that, so.
Pay as we go.
So this is just a potential scenario I've given you. These gentlemen are here obviously to hear what I was going to share tonight. Whether you use this, any available in the Legacy Crossing in response to their request or not, that's something you've got to decide, or consider their request if you're going to. But as you can see, there's not a lot of capacity there. Now, one idea I did suggest to Fred Hale, and then later suggested it to you, is that there might be the potential for tax increment generated from the development of their other 2 commercial lots to have some kind of agreement with what is done with that, where that goes. Whether that's back to them as an incentive for them to get those 2 lots developed, maybe make a deal sooner rather than later, because they would be getting that tax increment back associated with those 2 lots. Now, if you want to know what is generated by Maverick, which is a commercial development, we said that's about 10,000.
About 10,000.
I think about $10,000 of this next year's tax revenue. In other words, 10,000 of the 60,000 that I've told you is coming from this Fred Hill project area is associated with Maverick. So there's some data. I don't know what you want to do with it at this point. You don't have to, you can adopt the RDA budget next week without making those decisions.
Yeah.
We'll have lump sums in there that you can act upon during the year.
Well, and to your point about the possibility of trying to incentivize commercial development, I like the idea. I would want, this is why I like the idea of an economic development director, but some data behind it about what would be that point where that would be effective versus not, make a big difference versus not. And so whether it's the owners bringing that to us or us outsourcing, trying to get some information on what the smartest way to go about that kind of approach would be. But I don't believe, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, Steve, that we really have the in-house expertise to be able to make a really informed decision on that.
No, we're not in the business of commercial development. As the owner or investor in it, and so we wouldn't purport to be able to provide you with pro formas and what is needed to incentivize that pro forma to make it pencil out. You'd have to hire somebody to do that.
I do like the idea of working with Fred Hale on that and putting something on paper.
Yeah.
That's been my biggest concern about what's happened so far is if we're going to do something related to the commercial pads, as long as it's on paper and the commitment from the RDA is solid
and we've been shown it makes sense.
And it makes sense. Well, yes,
Because it's
assuming it makes
actually
sense, but
incentivize it.
I would prefer to make sure that as a developer, Fred has something he can hold up in his hand and say, this is what the actual agreement is. Because that's been my concern so far.
Now, Mayor, we did suggest earlier that these gentlemen might be able to speak again if you.
We did. I promised you that if you wanted to discuss this, come on up.
You want to interrogate him or should I?
We have 2 mics if you want to trade off.
We could
It's
tag
totally
team.
fine.
Tag team.
Okay, so first question, in regards to paying back the loan to Parish Gateway, the 200,000, what was that paid for to the Legacy Crossing? What was that for?
That funded the costs over a couple of years to create the project area. That's a big chunk of it. There was considerable consulting costs with our financial advisors. This was a very complex process that involved negotiating with every taxing entity an agreement, developing the estimated cost, infrastructure cost. So there was quite a bit of city engineer cost in preparing the estimates that were used in the plan. There was some investment in the intersection improvements initially in preparing it for eventually getting a traffic signals at 1250 West and Parish. Those are the things that come to the mind off the top of my head. And creating the district and getting all those other entities on board, creating the project area and getting all those taxing entities to agree was significant.
Okay, so basically that 200,000 is for administrative costs to create the
Engineering and administrative and financial analysis, as well as some physical improvements that
Okay.
were made to roadways.
I thought it
Okay.
was part of the infrastructure too.
Well, that's what I mean by the physical improvements, the infrastructure, the intersection, some initial. We had for example, the traffic signal for that intersection designed at that time. That was a cost. Within a few years of the creation of the project area, we had, the city engineer designed the signalization of that intersection as an incentive to move UDOT forward with their decision to fund it. And I think that alone was $35,000 to $40,000, for example.
Yes, numbers add up quick, I
Yeah.
agree. Going over your paperwork, you have this $10,000. Could you explain that again? You kind of breezed over that really quick. The third line underneath the
Yeah.
legacy crossing.
Yeah, I probably could have said that was 11,000, because then it would add up to 56,000, which approximates the 56,000 I'm showing as
Okay.
revenue over expenses on this worksheet. It also tends to be close to the 10,000 we're estimating is being generated by Maverick.
Okay. So it's listed as increase related to FH commercial development. What is
Yeah,
FH?
yeah, so that's where the 10,000 initially came from. It just happened to be about this.
Fred Hale is what FH is.
Yeah, FH is Fred Hale.
Got
So
it.
if there was more commercial development on this site that you represent, it would generate more than the 10,000 from the commercial properties.
So just making sure I have the correct numbers. So it's 10,000, give or take, from Maverick, and then 50,000 from the apartments. Is
That's
that
what
correct?
Jake's
Yeah.
analysis shows,
Okay.
yeah.
Cool. Yeah, and then just kind of a random thought since I have the mic. With the sign, the Welcome to Centerville City sign, it might be intelligent to discuss with Legacy Commons. There's too many legacies in that area, by the way. With Legacy Commons, with their water feature, I don't know if you'd like to coordinate that sign with that water feature, since it's going to be just across the street. Just an idea thrown out there.
Yeah, it's not on the ideal corner for Welcome to Centerville, because we're thinking people
Well,
coming
yeah.
off Legacy and coming east on the road and that southeast
Do you mean
corner.
design-wise?
Design
Design-wise.
feature
Oh.
wise.
Yeah.
Yep.
That was the intent of putting out a design of the four corners, is to then require all of the
Right.
items to.
Right. That's all I have. Thank you.
Thank
Thanks
you.
for your patience.
Any further discussion on that or questions?
We don't need decisions tonight, but if you want to take the dialogue further, you can, but I don't need direction tonight.
Right, that's what I assumed.
If you could come up to the mic, because there may be somebody listening out there. Well, we know for sure, because they hear us.
Hello to YouTube, whoever's out there. Bernard Creek timeline, does that still, that has about 14 years on it?
That had an overall 20-year period. And we're into the,
So it was written in
Second, I think-
14.
well, but the tax year first initiated 2 years ago. I think this next year's the third
Okay.
year.
Yeah, that's right.
This next year's the third year.
So 17 years left. Thank you.
Motion to adjourn the RDA and reconvene the city council meeting.
Do we need
We need
to,
to approve the other items.
don't we need to table the,
We did
did.
table the budget, didn't we?
Yeah, I think you tabled
We already
the-
tabled it to
Tabled the
Next
budget.
week.
26th.
oh, that's right, we did, beg your pardon.
Okay, we have a motion to,
In that case, I'll second.
You can take Bill, that's fine.
motion and seconded to adjourn RDA, reconvene the city council. All in favor, aye?
Aye.
Opposed?
I meant to say aye.
Okay, we're back at city council meeting.
just a moment, I have to switch class. Recording.
we're on item 13 on the agenda. We did have a topic for a closed meeting. That's one that we could, before I do that, I don't have any appointments to boards or committees this week, so on 14, so back to 13. Do we want to table that till we have further discussion? This was a personnel matter, annual reviews, or do you want to convene to a closed meeting and do it tonight?
Well, let me just modify what I said about it, so that you understand that if you're delaying the pay raise increases, then as far as I'm concerned, if you want to delay my annual review, that's fine too. So I'm not recommending you do it tonight. If you want to do it tonight, that's up to you.
Steve, I have a question. Who does the department head's annual review? Do you do that yourself? Do you and the mayor do it?
Well, I have an annual review with them, and the mayor and I make the decision to what raise they would get. That's per the salary administration guidelines that have been in place and continue to word it that way. But they're subject to those guidelines and the funding limitations.
That is your question there?
Yeah.
Okay. So what's the feeling on going to a closed meeting tonight?
I'm in favor of postponing.
Yes, thank you.
You had a.
I didn't
So
get up at
moved.
a 5 o'clock flight in New York, so I'm good, but
Who did, you?
Yeah, Tammy did. No,
Mayor.
I'm good.
I
though.
get
Flew in
up
this
early on
morning.
Tuesday mornings, it's late.
So we have I guess we're going to move that to our closed meeting next week then?
Or even
or
potentially the
just some
17th.
future point.
Yeah, maybe the 17th of July.
Okay. All right.
'Cause
So
you only got 2 hours next week, remember?
That's right. It's in writing.
RDA 2.
Right.
Yeah, yeah.
Motion to adjourn?
motion to adjourn?
Second.
All in favor, aye?
Wait, just,
Oh,
just miscellaneous other matters, even though there's no such thing anymore. John Miller, our South Davis Rec Center director, is retiring, as I've mentioned. And
When is his
to
first?
celebrate on June 25th, which I believe is Monday, it's a free night at the rec center. So bring your families, enjoy cookies, say goodbye to John.
Oh, that works out nice.
And I sent that email to you, Jacob, and you could put that on the website, let our residents know.
We do that. Okay.
It's way too late, too little, but there's some substantial dissatisfaction within some of the leadership at the rec center over the inadequate notice that was allowed to senior employees there.
I can't hear you, Bill. What are you saying?
There is some substantial dissatisfaction on the part of employees at the rec center over the notice that was given to senior employees about that retirement and that they were doing a search for someone. And like I say, it's too little and too late, but I register that for what it's worth.
Current employees of, current staff of the rec center, they did apply. So,
Turned down because they were told they were too late.
oh,
Now,
yeah,
there's a million things that could have gone on. Someone could have missed it. I recognize that. I'm just sharing that for what it's worth, and you can forget it as you leave the door.
we found a great person to replace him. We welcomed him in our meeting yesterday to start July 2nd. He's coming up from Moab.
Motion and a second, all in favor to adjourn?
Aye.
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 Adjourn.
There is no meeting on the 3rd, right?
Right.
Correct.